Hey everybody, it's Carson Gourdie, the sports anchor for Fox, Illinois, and Champaign. And last week was not the best game for Illinois. Illinois had to travel all the way out west to take on Big Ten newcomer, the Oregon Ducks, and they showed that they're probably too big, too fast, too strong for Illinois. Oregon walked away with the game 38-9, but at halftime, the score was 35-3. That's the kind of game where you don't want to be too critical about Illinois overall as a program. I mean, just the facts are Oregon has a really talented roster. They have a lot of 4 stars. They have a lot of 5 stars. It's a program that's been really helped with donor money. NIL is what you give out to high school recruits or you give out to those college transfers. They had $20 million to spend this year. You know, most programs are 4, 3, 5 million. So it's kind of like when the Oakland A's played the New York Yankees. One team's just going to have more talent. And, you know, you got to play perfect to try to beat them. And Illinois didn't play perfect. And I think two things can be true. Oregon was probably just too good, and Illinois played one of their worst games all year. Illinois didn't have an answer for those screen passes. Luke Altmaier threw 2 bad interceptions. And I think it's a game where you just kind of have to look and realize, like, Oregon's really good. I mean, they're the number 1 team in the country, but they have not played a half that dominant all year. When they played Purdue, that was kind of close at halftime. When they played Michigan State, that was a competitive game in the first half. Idaho, Boise State, those were competitive games. So definitely if Illinois is going to want to get back in the win column, they're going to have to play cleaner and more aggressive against Minnesota this week. And the Minnesota Golden Gophers, it does seem like every year, you know, people start to question if head coach PJ Fleck's really the guy. And then all of a sudden, quietly, they win 9 games. It seems like we're seeing a similar formula this year with Minnesota. You know, they started the year 2-3. That offense was struggling. Ugly losses to North Carolina and Iowa. But over the last couple of weeks, Minnesota's turned a page.
I think they're playing at a really high level. You can tell they're playing with a lot of confidence.
Here's their last 3 games. They just beat Maryland 48-23, beat UCLA 21-17, and then also beat the USC Trojans 24-17. That's when USC was ranked number 11 in the country. That was a good win at the time. And a big reason why Minnesota has taken that next level is because of that quarterback play. They have a quarterback transfer from New Hampshire. He's a senior. His name is Max Brosmer. He's not a dual threat guy, but so far he's been playing really clean with the football. Maryland, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. UCLA, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Minnesota lost to Michigan 27-24, but a reason why they're able to come back in that game was because of the play of Max Brosmer. And we've seen with Minnesota, like 2019, they had that really, really good team. You know, they went 11-2, and Tanner Morgan, their quarterback, threw for 30 passing touchdowns. And a big reason why was because they had NFL wide receivers, including Rashad Bateman. But we've seen, you know, from 2020 to 2023, this Minnesota offense has taken a step in the wrong direction. And you've seen a correlation with the wins going down. You know, they went from 11 wins to 9 wins to 8 wins to 5 wins last year. Over the last few years, PJ Fleck has been using that identity of using that running game. And it was hard to blame him. I mean, last year they had Muhammad Abraham. He was one of the best running backs in the entire country. But you definitely saw that the offense was more stifled than it was. And Minnesota still has a really good running game, or the products of having a good running game this year. Their running back, Darius Taylor, a sophomore, he had a great freshman year campaign. But this year, there's been games where he's been bottled up for 30 yards against UCLA. You know, there's been games where they weren't able to run the ball against Michigan. You know, I spoke to a Minnesota football beat writer, Andy Grider, who lives up in Minnesota. He says that Max Brosmer has shown that he can win a game on his own this year.
I think we've seen it. I think he did it against USC. I think he did it, you know, to get them back in the game against Michigan. I thought you saw him do it against UCLA in the Rose Bowl a couple of weeks ago. So he's proven to be able to do that. And now with Max Brosmer and his ability to kind of dissect things in a short intermediate passing game, you're able to see them play to their strengths and kind of throw it to run it. And some of the issues that they've had in the run game aren't as bad or aren't as glaring because of what, you know, Max is able to do in the passing game.
Big reason why Minnesota's passing game's been successful is because they do have a really good wide receiver with senior wide receiver Daniel Jackson. This is a guy that Aaron Henry called one of the most underrated players in the Big Ten. And now, Jackson, if you've been following Big Ten football, I mean, this is a guy that has been around for a while. I mean, last year he had 800 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns, but this year he's even taken a bigger role with Minnesota. You know, it's kind of a similar situation with what we see with Ja'Cory Franklin. I mean, when you need a first down, he's the guy that you're going to target. And Minnesota's defense, I think it's been a mixed bag so far. Like, if you just kind of box score watch and look at the total points per game, it's really strong. You know, they're only giving up 16 points a game, but I think it's important to know that 2 of those games were shutouts, and they were against inferior teams. If we look at some of the games so far this year with Minnesota, they gave up 31 points to Iowa. Caleb Johnson had a field day running against Minnesota. USC moved the ball pretty well, but they had 3 turnovers. That was too much to overcome. So overall, I mean, this is a very respectable defense for Minnesota this year. But they've shown times where they've given up some yards. Now, in the last 2 weeks, they've done a really good job bottling up UCLA for just 36 rushing yards. In Maryland, I mean, they win that game 48-23. I mean, Maryland moved the ball a little bit towards the end, but those were garbage time touchdowns. Now, Illinois actually comes into this game. They're 3-point underdogs. You know, this was a game at the beginning of the week. Vegas set Illinois as a 2-point favorite, but the bettors like what they're seeing from Minnesota. They're a team that started 2-3. Now they're 5-3 and playing their best football. And I think there's a couple reasons to chalk up to why Illinois, who's 6-2, why Illinois, who's ranked, playing an unranked Minnesota team. Why are they the underdog? Well, against Oregon, they kind of got beat up. Obviously, we can talk about what happened with that defense. We can talk about what happened to that offense. But just from a personnel standpoint, Illinois got banged up with injuries. Star wide receiver Pat Bryant, who leads the team in touchdowns, is going through concussion protocol. Ohio transfer Torrey Cox, one of Illinois' better players in the secondary, going through concussion protocol. Other players in the secondary, such as Caleb Patterson, Terrence Brooks, they're going through some injuries. But Illinois head coach Brett Bielema, he does think that all 4 of those players will be available on Saturday.
You know, I feel fairly confident, Pat. I mean, he literally told me yesterday there's not a chance he's not playing in this game, but I said, unless you stayed at Holiday Inn Express last night and got a doctorate degree I didn't aware of, you don't get to make that call, right? But he assured me he's going to.
And another thing that Illinois needs to get better is that passing game with Luke Altmaier. Over the last 2 weeks, he only had 80 passing yards against Michigan, and against Oregon, he had 160 yards and 2 interceptions. And now, I know Michigan was a completely different circumstance. That was a game where Michigan could not move the ball offensively. That's not a real offense. So you didn't want to make any mistakes that got Michigan right back in the game, like a stupid pick 6. So Illinois' offense definitely took their foot off the gas with Luke Altmaier. I mean, they were running the ball. But we saw with Oregon, just the precision wasn't there. You know, he's completing just 50% of his passes. And now, I do think you'll be able to run the ball probably a little bit against Minnesota. And it's tough against Oregon because, like, when you're down 14-0 right away, when you're down 21-3, you know, you kind of just only get to throw the football. And Illinois definitely this year has played better when there's been a balance on the offensive attack. And now, this is a game for Illinois. I don't expect it to be a sellout. We've heard no indication that it will be. But just overall throughout the year, the fans have been showing up more so than they have in any other year. You know, before 2016, Illinois didn't have a sellout. And then this year, they've already had 2, you know, against Kansas and Michigan. Games against Purdue, they had 55,000. So that is around the ballpark I would expect from Illinois. Against Minnesota, I would expect around 55,000 fans. The stadium holds 60,000, so that's a pretty sizable chunk. In the college football playoff, Big Ten title, that's probably out the door for Illinois, but I still think they got a lot to play for. If Illinois wins out this year, and I mean, they're playing some favorable games. I mean, Minnesota, you can win. Michigan State, you can win. Rutgers has been looking terrible over the last couple of weeks. You can definitely win that game. Northwestern, they've been struggling to score the ball this year. I mean, Northwestern's giving me a 3-9 program this year. I mean, those are 4 manageable games. If Illinois sweeps the table, they go 10-2. That'd be their most wins since 2001. And we're talking a nice Tampa Bowl. We're talking a nice Citrus Bowl in Orlando, Florida. You get to take the kids to Disney World. And these are the kind of games, like, if you finish and beat the teams that you're supposed to, you're going to get that increased donor money. Brett Bielema will show donors that Illinois is a stock worth buying. They're going to get more money to get those new transfers to replace Pat Bryant. They're going to get more donor money, so they're going to get more donor. They're going to get more donor money so they can improve that offense and defensive line. And this is a series. That Brett Bielema has been dominating for years. All time as a head coach, he's 10-0 against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. I don't know if you guys remember, but Brett Bielema used to be the head coach of Wisconsin. And over at Illinois, he's gotten the best of them. He's 3-0 against Minnesota as the head coach of the Illini. Their first meeting, he won 14-6 on the road, beat a ranked Minnesota team on the road. 2 years ago, he beat them 26-14 on Illinois' homecoming. And then last year was a crazy 27-26 victory. I think this is a game where both teams are playing pretty well. I don't think it's fair to judge Illinois just solely based on that Oregon game. That's a team that's super talented. Illinois is coming off a super emotional win over Michigan, and they just didn't play well. But if you judge the other 7 games throughout the year, they beat Michigan. Minnesota didn't. Illinois played very well against Nebraska and beat them on the road. Nebraska is a team that just barely lost to Ohio State last week. So Illinois is showing consistently throughout the year they're one of the better teams in the Big Ten. But I will say, I think there has been some indications that the defense has been struggling. Obviously, we saw a couple weeks ago, Purdue put up 49 points against Illinois. Purdue's a team that's been struggling all year against FBS competition. They've been struggling to put up 10 points against teams. And their running game dominated Illinois. And their backup quarterback, Ryan Brown, he found his groove with the passing game. We saw with Kansas, they moved the ball pretty well against Illinois. We saw with Nebraska, Dylan Raiola did throw the ball pretty well against Illinois at times. So I think this is a game where Minnesota with Brosmer is going to be able to put up some points. They have really good weapons with that wide receiver Jackson, Darius Taylor at running back. And Brosmer, while he's not dual threat, he has 6 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in the past 2 games. Saturday's going to be a gorgeous day, low 60s, high 50s. And this game's going to be an early one. This isn't going to be a super late game. And it's back to that 11 a.m. kickoff for the Illinois Fighting Illini. They've been spoiled the last couple of weeks. They've been on CBS at 2:30 against Oregon, 2:30 against Michigan. But head coach Brett Bielema is telling those fans, you still better be there.
So whatever we got to do, 11 o'clock, whatever Illinois fans are going to show up, I hope you be there, be loud, right? Just means you got to 11 a.m. kickoff. You got to get that first beverage, whether it's a coffee, a mimosa, a bloody, a Red Bull, whatever you got going, man. Just get up and get it going, and get here and get seated by about 10:30, and get ready to play be ready to be a part of a really good Big Ten football environment. I think should be pretty awesome. So,
well, that's going to wrap it up, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'm Carson Gourdie. Have a nice day.
Thanks for watching. Stick around by subscribing today and don't miss a single video.